Welcome to the third webinar in the series about transition planning for students. Today we're going to focus on preparing students for the living and working settings after graduation. The presenters today are Kate Cole, Transition Coordinator for Great Prairie AEA,
and Elaine Cook, Transition Coordinator from Prairie Lakes AEA.
Thanks for joining us today. The final reflection activity of our last learning opportunity asked you to think about 3 questions. How will you teach someone about the assessment process? What did you learn today that you will be able to use with your teachers or in your practice? In what ways will you apply the skills you gained from the activities? Please pause now and reflect on how you would answer one of those questions from the information shared at the last webinar entitled, "What is Secondary Transition?" Since our focus today is on preparation for the next setting or the next step in living and working, it is important to remember that the goal of transition planning is to make the adjustment from high school to life in the community as easy and successful as possible. This involves the transition of youth with disabilities from high school to living, learning, and working in the community after graduation. Bottom line, the overall goal is to help students make as smooth of a transition as possible from high school to life after high school, not just academically, but in all areas, including living and working. We want to help them become as independent and successful as possible so they can be happy and productive citizens.
So, we briefly reviewed assessments and the definition of transition. Now, it's time to move on to our first topic for today, preparing for living. As we all know, the better we plan, the smoother the trip. Let's watch a short clip that demonstrates this.
Good morning. If I could have everyone's attention, please. I know we're all eager to get on the road to Big Sur, so if we focus, I'm sure we can get through this orientation in under a half an hour. Then it's just Q&A, quiz, safety drills, pose for commemorative group photo, and we're off.
Don't worry, just sit next to me during the quiz and you can copy my answers.
Raj, what are you doing? I don't think so. You've had your allotted 6 ounces. The first bathroom break isn't until the Denny's located near Bakersfield, which is approximately 2.5 hours away. Remember, people, we're only as strong as our weakest bladder.
Nobody cares about your Kegel exercises.
We have 7 people and 2 cars. In the lead car, driven by Leonard, will be myself, Amy Farrah Fowler, and Penny.
Yes! He had you in the other car, but I got you upgraded.
She made the case that if we break down in the middle of nowhere, your Nebraska backwoods skills and brawny hands will give us the best chance to survive in the wild.
Brawny?
They're bigger than mine.
All right. Their expectation was to have a successful trip. What skills did they have? Well, Penny had brawny Nebraska hands in case they broke down. What plans did they make? They had a certain number of ounces of liquids and the stops were all planned out. We all use the backwards planning process in our lives, even if it's not quite to Sheldon's degree of micromanaging. So the key point to successful preparation for our students begins with backwards planning. Some important considerations are their post-secondary expectations realistic? Remember, a student in middle school has much more latitude since the purpose of the transition IEP is to begin planting seeds for alignment. Our middle school students do a variety of career explorations as a part of most middle school programs. We need to help our high school students connect classes and activities that support their post-secondary expectations to further develop their skills toward reaching their desired goal. Another important consideration is determining the student's strengths, interests, and preferences, as shown by this non-example video clip.
Kathy, you are now 14 and now know your strengths, interests and preferences. What are they?
What? I don't understand.
You are now 14. I need to know your strengths, interests and preferences for your IEP.
The only thing I know I'm interested in is going to lunch. What is a preference?
You will not go to lunch until you tell me your strengths, interests and preferences. I need this information for your IEP meeting this afternoon.
What does this have to do with anything? Okay, my strength is lunch, my interest is eating lunch with my friends, and my preference is going to lunch and not answering stupid questions.
Okay, hopefully this doesn't happen very often, but unfortunately in our time crunch day, it is too easy to simply copy what was on the previous IEP and ask, is this still the same? Of course, the majority of our students will simply reply, yes. Some things may stay the same, but certainly within a year's time, the student has developed some new interests or preferences along the way. Please be sure to allow the student's voice to be heard, but do not hesitate to ask specific questions. For example, if you ask, do you do your own laundry? They may say yes. However, at the IEP meeting, the parent may quickly respond, bringing your laundry downstairs and dropping it on the floor is not doing your laundry. It's important that we dig deeper and ask good questions. We know it is important to be sure that the post-secondary expectation for living aligns with the student's assessment information. If their goal does not seem realistic, then the student needs to understand what steps that he or she needs to take in order to reach their desired goal. Again, this is not crushing their dream, but helping them develop a plan to understand what that goal entails. This involves consensus of the team, yet must be driven by the student. Oftentimes, the student does not have a clear understanding of what is involved with their choice. So the team needs to help outline the skills the student will need to develop in order to reach their goal. As we have stated, backwards planning is the key. We can't help our students get to where they want to go if they don't know what they need in order to get there. Interviews and observations are very helpful to discover and discuss what the student wants to do, what the student can do, and what the student needs to learn in order to reach their post-secondary expectation in living, as well as in all other areas. Having multiple points of view and different perspectives can help show what others see as the student's strengths, as well as areas that may need to be worked on in order to help them develop any skill gaps. Parent input is vital here. They know their child's living skills better than anyone, so be sure to include their input. After all, they are a critical part of the IEP team. How are the students' self-advocacy, self-determination skills? We will discuss this more in depth later in our presentation. But while the students are in the safety net of school, this is an important time to help them develop these much needed skills. And last, how are their skills in comparison to their peers? If their living skills are similar, then that should be documented under the living result. If there are skill gaps that have been identified, these should also be clearly outlined in the living results section. Please remember that parent input is vital for this section, and value their voice, since they are the true experts in regards to the students' living skills. Any identified needs must be addressed later in the IEP, either through a general education class, supporting activities, possible linkages, or If the student needs explicit instruction in the identified area, then it may require a goal and accommodations or modifications needed to support that goal. For example, if the parent notes that the student has poor money management skills or any others that were identified, then the IEP team needs to outline how these needs will be addressed in the IEP. Please remember that an identified need does not necessarily equate to a goal. Poor money management skills could be addressed through a class that district students are required to take, such as a personal finance or financial literacy class, or possibly through a family and consumer science class that includes household budgeting. When a need has been identified, these are often listed in the third course of study box, the courses and activities on the IEP. Remember that this is the only section of our current IEP that can project multi-year activities and supports. Some often brought up parent concerns are budgeting, needing to get their driver's license, and cooking skills. Many of these start with general education class, and then if further instruction is needed, may later be addressed through a goal.
We're now going to look at the Living Resources and Tools document that was shared with you along with this presentation. As you can see in the document, the first section outlines the types of supports that may be implemented to meet students' needs. Next, as you scroll down within that document, you will see a table that includes the various areas of living that may be addressed to determine students' needs, may be assessed to determine students' needs and to meet those needs. The table also includes resources or tools for addressing the identified needs in each area. Below the table are further guiding resources. These provide more in-depth information. First, we'd like you to begin by thinking about a student you've been working with. Then take time to explore at least one resource or tool in each of the areas of living. Please take time now to open the document entitled Living Resources and Tools that was included with the presentation. And as you consider those various resources, consider when could this tool be beneficial for you or your students in the area of living? What popped out at you that you hadn't considered before in the area of living? Please pause the recording now to explore the living resources in the document. Be sure to bookmark any of these resources that you found helpful for later use. Now you can take a look at the Living Learning Working Chart that was included with this presentation. Continue to think about the student you've been working with that you had in mind when exploring the Living Resources and Tools document. Section number 5 on the Living Learning Working Chart includes the courses and activities, goals, and support services and linkages sections of the IEP. Based on the information you know about the student and the living resources and tools you just explored, what types of supports might you suggest for that student? You may pause the recording now and take a few minutes to think about and write down your suggestions for how the student's needs might be met. Based on the student's individual needs, suggestions might include general education courses like family and consumer science classes to meet needs in cooking, math courses such as personal finance, or case management services, to name a few. In order to support students in achieving their goals in the area of working, the team should always focus on the student's post-secondary expectations. This long-term goal should be the focus of the entire IEP that all services and supports are working towards. As with the living post-secondary expectation, the working PSE should be realistic, meaning that the goal is a job or career that the student can learn the skills for while maintaining high expectations. The student's interest should be a driving factor in establishing the post-secondary expectation, along with available assessment information that indicates the student's skills and aptitudes in relation to those specific careers. It's important that we dig deeper into the initial conversation with the student. For instance, a student might tell a teacher he wants to be a mechanic, but the teacher knows he has an aversion to getting his hands dirty. When asking the student what he likes about what a mechanic does, He describes standing around and talking with the guys. There's a mismatch between what the student envisions the job to be and the reality of the job. The teacher can then help the student refine his working PSE by looking at jobs that include standing around talking with the guys without getting his hands dirty. After collecting and reviewing the information, the IEP team should come to a consensus about the working post-secondary expectation so that all are in support of working towards the same long-term goal for the student. Once the PSE for work is determined, the team should keep the end goal in mind to determine what supports are needed for the student. This PSE for working drives the entire IEP conversation. Teams should use the backwards planning process to determine what skills the student needs to learn and the courses to take to explore interest areas or gain skills for the career area. Knowing the end goal also helps the team determine the accommodations to provide and services and supports that need to be documented in the IEP. Students often know about jobs that their parents or other adults they know are currently working in. For some students, we may need to expand their horizons by exploring areas they are unfamiliar with. It is important to explore and discuss the students' interests and how those align with activity skills that are involved within a job. This can help lead to jobs that would fit with their interest areas. For example, if a student says she wants to be a surgeon, but also says she really doesn't like seeing blood, it would be helpful to ask questions about what she likes about being a surgeon. It may be that she thinks wearing a white doctor's coat is really cool, which could lead to exploring other jobs where she could wear the white coat. This would expand her opportunities and lead to a career that fits both her true interests and her skills. The working PSE needs to be determined in order to know what training, education, or degree or certificate the student needs to pursue to gain employment in a particular field or career. The team needs to identify the specific skills needed for a career, such as physical requirements, academic or interpersonal skills, self-advocacy skills, and more. Teams should also identify soft skills the student will need to be successful in the next setting, which can be taught in the classroom. The soft skills required at a job are often the same skills needed in the classroom, so high school is a great place to practice such skills. All students need to develop self-advocacy skills to use in their lives. Some examples of practicing such skills at school might include teaching the student how to approach their teachers to request accommodations for a test or assignment, supporting students as they solve conflict with staff or peers, or identifying which accommodations or supports are truly helpful to the student in certain situations. Teams should also consider fading services to align with those that will be available in the next setting, such as paraprofessional or adult assistance, modifications, or accommodations. We may be doing a disservice to students if we're providing too much help without allowing them situations in which to grow and develop their skills. When needs have been identified, the IEP team must address each need through the most appropriate avenue. There may be an academic or exploratory gen ed class that would address the necessary skills or assist the student with exploration of certain topics or careers. Activities might include engaging the student in a mock interview or a job shadow. Assistive technology may be needed to help students explore and meet their working needs and interests. Let's watch a video about Nick and how his interests became a career.
So he came over one day with his van and picked Nick up, and we went over to the high school. And within 20 minutes, Nick is zigzagging around the light poles, real slow. And, you know, I thought it was a pipe dream, actually, because I didn't know the technology that was out there. And I called Audrey up at home and told her, you need to get in the truck and come on over to the high school, sit back a ways so you don't make him nervous, and watch. And at that point, I knew it was obtainable.
Since I was in seventh grade, but before that, I have a normal desktop computer with the big keyboard. My dad helped me do a book. Open email compose urging.
The product of success is to surround yourself with good resources and people. As with a disability or anybody, you're only as successful as the people you have around you.
What did you hear from Nick about how his interests and needs were intertwined? It was interesting to me to see how the assistive technology helped him both using the computer and to make a working post-secondary expectation or career for him that matched. Students need to understand the relevance of how their IEP goal areas and all IEP services are related to their post-secondary expectations. The more that the student is engaged in the transition process and sees the relevance of the work, the more likely they are to be successful after high school. There are a variety of people who can help students in the area of work, which makes it vital to facilitate communication with all providers involved with the student. This may include guidance counselors, vocational rehabilitation staff, intermediaries, community resource providers or job coaches, work experience coordinators, and others. The student might connect with a military recruiter or college employee, such as the disability support coordinator, to learn more about the requirements and supports that are offered. Staff can best support students by sharing assessment information and the services or activities they are completing with students. Helpful information about the student's skills can often be gathered during activities or teaching time, which may be quality assessment data for future IEP development. Communication and collaboration among all providers can help minimize duplication of supports and assure that all needs are met. The special education teacher's role is to pull all of the information together within the IEP. We are now going to look at the document entitled Working Resources and Tools that was shared with you. It contains the same format as the Living Resources and Tools document that we explored earlier in this presentation. It includes a chart that may help the IEP teams address students' needs. So on the document, you can see that chart with all of the areas of working, some questions to consider, and again, on the right-hand side, the resources or tools that teams might use to help meet identified student needs. Below that chart, you can also see many other links, including child labor laws, which are very important for schools to review before placing students in work experiences. Please pause the recording now to explore the Working Resources and Tools document. Considering the information you know about the student you were thinking about earlier in the presentation, and the working resources and tools you just explored, what types of supports might you suggest that could be documented in the IEP and in the Living Learning Working Chart? Suggestions might include courses and activities, goals, supports, services, linkages, accommodations and modifications. Consider what the team might recommend for that student you had in mind. You might also think about job shadows, connecting with vocational rehabilitation, pre-employment transition services, work experiences in or out of the school building, mock interviews, interest inventories, and more based on the individual student needs. Pause the recording now and take a few minutes to think about and write down your suggestions for how to meet the student's needs.
We've addressed the impact that backwards planning has on our students' future success in the areas of living and working, based, of course, on appropriate assessment data. Yet, we would be remiss if we did not highlight the important role that self-advocacy plays. So, what is self-advocacy?
I am Maxwell and I am so excited to be attending my IEP meeting. I can't wait to tell you all about me.
Maxwell, we have already created your plan, so now you can just sit and listen to this plan for you.
But I want to tell you about all the things I want to do someday and the help I need to get so that I can reach my goals.
Maxwell, we already have all of the reports and we have made a plan for you. Would you like to hear it?
Maxwell, you will like this plan, so just please sit down and listen.
But what about my plan and all the things I want to tell you that will help me?
Maxwell, do you need to leave the room to compose yourself and then we can continue to talk about our plan for you?
I am leaving and I don't want to ever come back or follow your plan. Goodbye.
So, hopefully our Maxwell video is not a practice that happens very often, but it is a stark reminder of how sometimes we do the IEP to the student and unfortunately not with the student. Why should they be engaged if we have not allowed them to have a voice in their planning? Helping students learn how to self-advocate is just that. It is helping them learn how to speak or act for themselves, to help them decide what is best for them and to take charge of getting it. It is to help them learn how to make their own decisions about their own life. It's about helping them stand up for their rights as a person and to help them teach others about their rights and responsibilities. When this does not come naturally to some of our students, it is critical that we model and coach these skills, either through a simple process of I do, we do, you do, or if needed, through more explicit instruction with a self-advocacy goal. So, why is self-advocacy important? Well, it states it helps students develop assertiveness skills and good communication skills. If we want our students to be happy, productive citizens, we need to make sure that they have good communication skills to effectively and appropriately talk to their friends, their landlords, co-workers, and employers. It also says that self-advocacy teaches students to make decisions and choices that affect their lives so that they can be more independent. If we do not help our students develop self-advocacy skills, someone else will gladly make decisions for them, which may not be in our students' best interests. Self-advocacy also helps them to develop confidence about their abilities. By helping our students learn to appropriately advocate for themselves, they become more confident and independent as they grow. It is also important to understand the role that self-advocacy plays on the future employability skills for our students with disabilities. When we model, reinforce, and teach self-advocacy skills with our students, we help them to be better prepared for life, including when they are employed. By helping our students develop self-advocacy skills, they will be able to advocate for when they need additional accommodations at their job site. It will also help them to have the confidence to advocate when their workplace does not provide access, possibly due to a barrier that is in the way, and they need to ask for it to be removed in order to complete their designated task. And most importantly, if a student future employee is having difficulty completing the expected tasks due to their disability, they will be able to ask for additional assistance or help if they need it. The benefits of self-advocacy in the areas of both living and working, well, and of course learning, are critical to our students' success as they transition to life after high school, and we are no longer there to model and coach them. We do not want them to feel powerless and dependent upon others. It is easy to see that developing strong self-advocacy skills goes way beyond simply academics. This is a critical life skill that we must not overlook. Self-advocacy is not being the squeaky wheel that is always complaining. Self-advocacy is empowering our students to appropriately stand up for their rights. This helps them be prepared to take on life's challenges. And just a quick mental reminder, we sometimes actually do more harm than good when we are helping our students out. 3 of the most common ways we do this are when we deal with the students' problems for them. When we go and talk to the teacher for the student, usually because it's quicker on our part, we are taking the responsibility away from the student. And occasionally, we may not have the whole story, which inevitably may cause us to need more time now. Another, teachers tend to make the majority of decisions for the student, including the IEP. When the students are not a part of the decision-making process, they are not given the chance to think critically about possible options. Again, why should they be engaged in their education if they aren't being given the chance to engage? And the sad reality is that often many of our students cannot even tell you what their goal areas are and why they are on an IEP. If asked, oftentimes their reply is, well, to get help with my homework. If we do not have honest conversations with how their skill discrepancies will impact their post-secondary expectations, then we have greatly hindered our students' post-secondary plans. This is why it's important to backwards plan and begin with the end in mind. So, where do we begin? To best prepare our students for what's next in the area of living and working, we must encourage them to have a voice in their planning and to help them develop that voice if needed. Begin with baby steps and have them share out several components of their IEP, such as their strengths, interests, and preferences, their post-secondary expectations, and continue to build on that. The sooner you can begin doing this, the more practice our students will get.
To summarize, both the areas of living and working play an integral role for preparing for the next setting in the success of our students. After you have gathered assessment data, Be sure to include the student in the planning and help them understand the skills that they need to develop in order to reach their post-secondary expectations. To help solidify and apply the information shared in this presentation, take a few minutes to think about and document the following prompts. What are 3 new things you learned today? 2 ahas that popped into your mind? And 1 thing you'll implement right away. The most important thing we can do within the transition process is to help students match their interests with their skills and provide the supports needed for them to become successful. Let's take a few minutes to watch one final video. Listen to hear how the employees' skills are valued.
Our employees follow processes. They're really excited to be here.
How many cars do we need outside? 350.
They have a great eye for detail. We view autism as one of our key competitive advantages. My name is Tom Dieri. And I'm the COO of Rising Tide Car Wash. Andrew's my younger brother by about 18 months. We found out Andrew has autism when he was about 3 years old. Growing up with Andrew as a brother, I mean, it was just different. We never really fought. We also, though, never had the closeness that typically siblings that are so close in age would have.
Chips and goldfish. Both, right? What else did you have for lunch?
I don't want him to sit in a room taken care of by others once I'm gone. I want him to have a life. I want him to have a job. I want him to have friends that are like him. So this car wash, it creates an answer for Andrew, and also creates an answer for their mom, who's taken care of him and done all the heavy lifting. Where are the reinforcements? She's done all the work. Okay, so that's hard.
What we find in the autism community is that once someone turns 22 and ages out of the school system, there's very little of any meaningful activity. In the autism community, we call that falling off the cliffs. Typically, people with autism are really good at structured tasks, following processes, attention to detail. So we saw that there are really important skills that people with autism have that make them, in some cases, the best employees you could have.
How many are we going to do this weekend?
Hopefully over 1,000. They come to us with very little purpose and very little hope for their future. Open up on you?
Yes, it did.
But once they start working with us and they start to get the positive reinforcement of, doing a good job, customer being happy, them getting a tip, that really starts to open them up.
Yeah, it did. Kind of open up on me.
And they start to be able to think about what they might be able to do with their lives, whether that be stick with us or go do something that is more closely aligned with whatever their aspirations are.
Oh, you come to work tomorrow? Help me? Tomorrow? Like on Thursday and a morning shift?
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't have a choice then.
We've seen a lot of really great improvements as far as my closeness with him and his desire to have social interactions and social relationships.
Andrew, you take passenger, time money, you take driver, okay? No?
I'll give him orders just like I would give any employee an order. And yeah, he'll roll his eyes at me or, not be too thrilled about it, but I feel like that's a normal interaction between a younger brother being told by his boss and his older brother what to do. So that's, it's really great.
I'm gonna be 24 and Dad and Tom are the owners of the wash.
How do you like working with them?
I like working with them a lot.
We wanted to try to identify a consumer business that could educate the broad community around how capable people with autism really are. The car wash, at its best, it's very well structured. Every part of the business is a process. And it's a really tangible service. You're going to see, oh, wow, these guys did a great job. Oh, hey, all these guys have autism. Okay, and start to fill in the blanks. And hopefully we can change that perception.
So what did you see or hear that spoke to you? What I heard is that he said that autism is a key competitive advantage, which I think was a really neat statement. He talked about the employees thriving on structured tasks and attention to detail, which were aligned with the tasks in the job, and that they were all excited to be there. By using assessment data from multiple perspectives, we can help students be prepared for life after high school in the areas of living and working. When we start with the end in mind, it helps outline the actions that the students need to complete in order to reach their desired post-secondary expectations and to gain the necessary skills to be productive citizens who can self-advocate for their needs. The next and final webinar in this series will focus on preparation for the next setting in learning, focusing on both training and education as the focal point. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope that you can join the team next month as well as watching the previous 2 webinars in this series. Thanks again.